is happening down there at Canada? What do they want? What does Trudeau want? Means was it necessary at this point in time? If they have so many proof, why don't they just hand it over to India? Why do just go so publicly? He was recently here, he met a lot of officials here. So why this? I don't know. What do you make out of this whole thing that is going on between India and Canada, with the state of affairs, the state of politics, the state of international relations between the two countries?
So just to summarize the situation for those in the audience who are not familiar with any of the stories, at the UN, Trudeau made a very rare and very dramatic public accusation against India, claiming that the assassinated a Sikh activist in Canada, and that supposedly Canadian intelligence had evidence of that. Later on, a US diplomat claimed that the intelligence came from Five Eye countries, the English-speaking intelligence alliance, but neither of them said what that evidence was, pointing to the Indian intelligence services. Now, the truth of the matter, that particular activist was not some, quiet political critical journalist or anything like that. He came to Canada under false pretenses. He came with a fictitious, fake documents, a fake name that he gave to the locals, claimed asylum. And all of this comes in the middle of the fact that there is a group of such activists in Canada who are apparently quite violent, politically subversive, and they are known for instigating terrorist attacks inside India, and there's a big conflict. Pakistan and China have all been backing this particular activist, as has been Canada politically. Why it has chosen to take that position, nobody knows, but Trudeau specifically has very close links to China, and there's been a lot of criticism of his handling of Chinese espionage inside the country recently. This public accusation may be a way to try to divert attention from his own negligence concerning Chinese involvement and whatever corruption may there be. Whether or not there is actual evidence pointing towards the intelligence services is unclear, because it is a very risky step to try to assassinate somebody on the territory of an allied country, and not somewhere, when there is a very high possibility of a scandal in the event such action is discovered. Could it have been some other party that has intervened, a rogue faction of the intelligence, a rival from the same circles who was, doing a false flag, ISI or anybody else? It's unclear, because right now we are not seeing the evidence. But what I can tell you that in terms of the communication pattern, this whole story is very similar to the scandalous Khashoggi situation, where likewise, early on, the US intelligence claimed that the evidence was pointing to the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, but never provided evidence for their claims. And then later on, we learned that several interested parties had a direct stake in political outcomes concerning certain geopolitical events, namely Turkey and Syria and Qatar, that was having a crisis, and various internal factions inside Saudi Arabia. So the pattern is very much the same. There's a very big claiming support from the intelligence community, but notice that all of it is coming from political figures. Nobody in the intelligence community is actually saying anything. So the question is, why not produce an intelligence report? Why not have the director of the intelligence service actually lay credence? Because in reality, that's not how intelligence works. There's a comprised report assessing likely factors and likely scenario. Very often there isn't a concrete evidence stating this is who did it. We're talking about intelligence and not law enforcement. There is a high likelihood, these are the factors that we have considered, and so on and so forth. All of that is reported to the Prime Minister and his people, and they ultimately decide whether or not they find this intelligence credible and what policy they make based on that. So there may have been some reporting about certain factors, but that doesn't mean that there was a conclusive decision. Yes, the intelligence did it, and this is how they did it, and who's responsible. It sounds to me like it was a much less clear assessment, rather from the Five Eyes from Canada itself, and that the Prime Minister and he has chosen to make it into a political accusation based on that, but maybe lacking the details that he can turn over. I think he believes it to be true based on the analysis, but there may not be evidence clearly pointing irrefutably that such and such intelligence person did it. They kicked out one diplomat that they accused of being the head of intelligence, but they didn't even claim that that particular diplomat had anything to do with this particular story, just that he was being kicked out because they're mad at the intelligence, not that he was in any way responsible for facilitating that alleged operation. So all of that to me sounds very murky. It sounds like a big political scandal that's growing bigger over nothing. And I do think that the timing has to be political, because if you're investigating intelligence services and you have tensions with the country accusing of meddling in your elections, why have we never heard about it before? Because in the US, there are plenty of countries that are meddling in US politics, and we hear about it constantly. So the fact that there's been this complete mute button on alleged Indian meddling, and all of a sudden turns out that for years it's been a problem, it's, to me, doesn't seem like a very convenient political timing.
Absolutely. Governments come and go, leaders come and go, but the relations between country and its people remain. And without credible evidence, or they could have shared something much more credible with the government, they could have investigated, evaluated it, then it's a different story. And that is why our foreign minister Jaishankar, he said political convenience shouldn't determine counterterrorism. That was at the United Nations General Assembly. And I don't know, how do you look at the relations going forward getting impacted by this thing, which I guess will never be able to come into open, because it's just an accusation, and it will be very difficult to come out with anything, because by now Mr. Trudeau had already come out if he had anything. How do you look at then this impacting India-Canada relations, because they even Canadian military people are not wanting it to link with the political situation. A lot of exercise exchange is happening here in India with Canada. So I don't know, how do you look at it going forward between the impact of this particular incident on the relations between India and Canada in terms of international relations?
Short term, politically, it's turning into a big scandal, because now Indian diplomats have launched accusations claiming that Trudeau had cocaine in his airplane. The Canadian counterparts rejected that claim. Nobody knows what really happened and whether it's even relevant. Does it really matter whether Trudeau had cocaine on his plane or not? The question is, what does Canada want out of this diplomatic incident? If their interest is in terminating relations with India, they could have just done so immediately. This is completely unacceptable. We demand, XYZ, or we are terminating relations. Instead, they just keep on going. They kicked out this diplomat, but they keep on persisting. Now a US diplomat is coming in. Now, this means that they're getting the United States involved because they've mishandled the situation. It is not normal for a third party, no matter how close an ally they are, to have to intervene in a bilateral scandal between two states. This is not normally done. The fact that a US diplomat had to go on record with such a statement shows that the situation is already out of control. So what did Trudeau intend? If he wanted a small distraction, why did he not leak it through the media? Then he could have had a small limited scandal. Everybody would have traded a media campaign for a while, and on political level, it would have been a distraction. It would have been forgotten. But he launched an official accusation at the huge international platform, causing complete embarrassment to everyone involved. This is not a situation where you can now, can't move back. You cannot, if he had first privately engaged with the Indian government, they could have said, listen, guys, we don't like it. Don't do it again. Here's what's going to happen if you do it again. And this is what we expect from you now. And then you could have had, toned down the rhetoric, handled it, managed it. When you launch a public accusation out of the blue on an international stage, there's no moving back from this, because now it's a big provocation. It's a big aggressive move, and neither terminate the relations diplomatically nor take any concrete measures. I just think it's a really big miscalculation by Trudeau. He did not handle it well at all. It was not professional. It was not good for Canada's national security, for relations with India, and it's going to be very hard to manage. And it's turning into a big embarrassment for Canada because of the situation with the terrorists being hosted there. Now there's scrutiny about all these people, and it's all over the media. Now it's even reaching UK, because now there are articles looking at the activity in UK. It's actually turning into a positive boost for India, because from India's perspective, they want those groups to be scrutinized all over the world, because they are a problem for them politically. So if Trudeau wanted to benefit India, this is actually beneficial from a security perspective, because now we're looking at these groups and what they're doing, and we're looking at Canada's handling of this case, and it's been handled very badly. There's a question how somebody comes in the false pretenses into a country and he's not deported once they find out that he gave the wrong information. He's not arrested, he's not investigated. Why are they covering for a terrorist? And if it was a terrorist that was killed, yes, you still don't want another country meddling in your territory, but what are you doing about your own security issues? If you're hosting terrorists and you don't even know who they are?
Right. Moving on from this particular issue, let's look at